Welcome to English Easy Hub. Join us as we ignite the flames of your English learning journey together.
Please subscribe to watch and embark on your English learning journey. Don't miss out on the exciting content. In this conversation, Andy seeks guidance on how to speak English like a native. He expresses frustration over his progress and is eager to understand the deeper aspects of fluent, natural speech. The teacher provides insightful advice on several key areas that contribute to sounding like a native English speaker: pronunciation, fluency, idioms, cultural context, and conversation strategies. The teacher's responses offer practical tips, focused on both technical language skills and the cultural nuances that make English truly authentic. This conversation serves as a comprehensive exploration of what it takes to achieve natural-sounding English in daily life.
Hi, teacher. I've been wondering, how can I speak English like a native? I've been practicing a lot, but I feel like I'm still missing something.
That's a great question, Andy. To speak like a native, you need to focus on several key aspects: pronunciation, fluency, idioms, cultural context, and conversation strategies. Let's dive deeper into each of these. First, pronunciation. It's not just about saying the words correctly, but also about how you use intonation, stress, and rhythm in your speech. Native speakers have a natural flow to their speech, where certain words or syllables are stressed and others are de-emphasized. This gives their speech a melodic quality. You'll need to tune into that rhythm and mimic it. I suggest listening to podcasts or watching TV shows in English and paying attention to the way the speakers emphasize words.
That makes sense. I've been watching shows in English, but I usually focus on understanding the meaning. Should I focus more on how they say things rather than just the meaning?
Absolutely. While understanding the meaning is essential, focusing on the rhythm, stress, and intonation will give you that native feel. For instance, English often emphasizes content words like nouns, verbs, and adjectives, while function words like the of and are de-emphasized. Pay attention to how they stress important words in a sentence. For example, when someone says, "I love ice cream," the emphasis on love makes the sentence feel more engaging and authentic. In contrast, if you say, "I love ice cream," it sounds a bit off because the wrong word is stressed. This subtlety is what makes native speech sound smooth and fluent.
Oh, I see. That sounds interesting. But what about fluency? Sometimes, I freeze up during conversations and struggle to find the right words. How do native speakers keep their conversations so smooth?
Fluency is a combination of practice, exposure, and confidence. Native speakers have years of practice, so they don't consciously think about every word. They just say what comes to mind. You can achieve fluency by practicing thinking in English, which helps reduce the habit of translating from your native language. Another technique is to use fillers like a, or well, which are natural in everyday conversations when someone needs a moment to think. These fillers give the speaker time to organize their thoughts without sounding like they're struggling. They're part of the flow of the conversation. So, don't be afraid to use them. Just be sure not to overuse them, as that might make you sound less confident.
That's helpful. I do tend to translate in my head before speaking, which slows me down. But what if I don't know the right word for something? Is it okay to use simple words or explanations instead?
Yes, absolutely. If you don't know the exact word, don't be afraid to use a simpler word or even explain what you mean. Native speakers do this all the time. For example, if you can't remember the word scissors, you could say, "It's the tool you use to cut paper." The goal is to communicate clearly, and being able to describe something in simpler terms is a valuable skill. Also, don't hesitate to ask for clarification if you don't understand something. Native speakers are used to explaining things in different ways, especially when speaking with non-native speakers. It's all about flexibility in communication.
That's reassuring. But what about idioms? I know native speakers use them a lot, and I sometimes feel lost when I hear them. How can I start using them without sounding forced?
Idioms are a fascinating part of language, and they do make you sound more native when used appropriately. However, they can also be tricky because idioms don't always translate literally. The best way to start using them is to learn them in context. For example, if you hear an idiom like hit the nail on the head in a conversation or a movie, pay attention to when and why it's used. Native speakers don't just use idioms for the sake of it. They use them because they add color and emphasis to the conversation. I suggest starting with a few common idioms and incorporating them into your speech when the situation feels natural. But don't force them. You wouldn't drop an idiom into every sentence, just like you wouldn't overuse slang with your friends.
So, it's about using them naturally, like I would use slang with my friends in my own language, right?
Exactly. That's the key. Using them as a natural part of your speech. Native speakers use idioms and slang to emphasize their point or to sound more relatable. The trick is not to sound like you're trying too hard to be cool. You'll know you're using idioms right when they feel effortless, just like you would use colloquial expressions in your native language. They should come naturally and fit the context of the conversation.
That helps a lot. I've also been wondering about cultural context. Sometimes, I feel like I understand the words, but I miss the cultural nuances. How can I get better at that?
Understanding cultural context is crucial for sounding native because language is deeply intertwined with culture. In English, certain phrases or expressions often have cultural references that may not make sense without understanding the context. For example, if someone says, "I'm just killing time," they're not literally talking about death. They're using a cultural expression that means they're passing time without any real purpose. To get better at cultural context, immerse yourself in English-speaking media, movies, TV shows, books, news, and notice the references, the humor, and how people interact in different settings. Also, try to have conversations with native speakers and ask them questions about expressions or jokes you don't understand. Over time, you'll begin to pick up on the nuances that make language so rich and dynamic.
Oh, so I need to get more familiar with things like pop culture and history to really get those subtleties, right?
Yes, exactly. Familiarity with pop culture, history, and social dynamics will help you understand the underlying meaning of many expressions. But it's not just about memorizing facts or phrases. It's about understanding how language evolves based on society. For example, knowing about the American holiday of Thanksgiving gives you insight into expressions like giving thanks, which might be used metaphorically in everyday conversation. It's also helpful to keep up with current events or trends, as they often influence the way people speak. The more you learn about the culture, the more you'll start to notice how language reflects that culture.
That's so true. I think I need to expand my cultural knowledge, especially with slang and references. Are there any specific cultural aspects I should focus on first?
Start with the basics: everyday expressions, greetings, and social interactions. English speakers often talk about the weather, plans for the weekend, and daily routines. These are safe, easy topics for starting conversations. After that, you can move on to more complex topics like social issues, politics, or humor, as they're often infused with cultural references. I recommend watching late-night talk shows, which are filled with humor, current events, and references to popular culture. Additionally, reading blogs, news websites, or even Twitter can give you insight into what's happening in the world and the way people discuss it.
Okay, I'll definitely start paying more attention to those things. But what about conversation strategies? I know native speakers can change topics smoothly or tell engaging stories. How can I improve in that area?
Great question. A lot of smooth conversation comes down to active listening and staying present in the moment. When a native speaker is talking, they aren't just waiting for their turn to speak. They're engaging with the person they're talking to. They ask follow-up questions, give feedback, and show genuine interest. A good strategy is to practice conversational techniques like mirroring, repeating part of what the other person just said in your response. For example, if someone says, "I had a great weekend at the beach," you could say, "The beach sounds like a lot of fun. What did you do there?" This helps keep the conversation flowing and shows that you're actively engaged. The AS for storytelling. Native speakers often use a clear structure when telling stories: beginning, middle, and end. They also inject personality and emotion into their stories.
That makes sense. I tend to overthink things when I'm telling a story, but it sounds like I just need to practice and relax. What about slang? Do I need to use it to sound more native?
Slang can help make you sound more casual and natural in informal settings, but it's not essential to sounding native. The key is to use it appropriately. If you're talking to friends or in an informal setting, slang is great. But in more formal settings, such as business meetings or professional contexts, it's better to stick with standard English. The goal is to be relatable and approachable, not to try too hard to fit in. Learn slang gradually and pay attention to how native speakers use it in context.
Got it. I'll start paying attention to the context more. This conversation has been so helpful. Do you have any final tips for me as I continue to work on my English?
Yes, my final tip would be this: don't rush it. Language acquisition is a journey, not a race. It's important to keep challenging yourself, but don't feel discouraged if you make mistakes. They're an integral part of the learning process. Set small, achievable goals, whether it's learning 5 new idioms, improving your pronunciation, or being able to tell a story with more fluency. And most importantly, have fun with it. Language learning is not just about grammar rules or vocabulary. It's about expressing yourself and connecting with others. Stay curious, be patient with yourself, and keep practicing. The more you engage with the language, the more natural it will feel.
Thanks so much for the advice. I feel much more confident now. I'll definitely keep practicing and work on these areas. I'll check in with you again soon.
Anytime, Andy. Keep up the great work. And remember, learning a language is like building a house. It takes time, but the results are worth it.
The core value of this conversation lies in the teacher's detailed guidance on mastering the subtleties of English communication. By emphasizing the importance of pronunciation, fluency, and cultural context, the teacher helps Andy realize that speaking like a native is not just about vocabulary and grammar, but about rhythm, intuition, and understanding cultural references. The advice given encourages a balanced approach, where practice, confidence, and immersion in English-speaking culture are key. Ultimately, the conversation reinforces that language learning is a gradual journey, and with consistent effort, Andy can achieve his goal of speaking English fluently and naturally, just like a native speaker.
Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share to keep the English learning journey alive.